All right, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're diving deep into the Twilight Saga, but not in the way you might think. Yeah, we're
Ah,
not going to rehash the whole Edward Billa Jacob thing.
okay.
Instead, we're turning our attention to a character who, let's face it, often gets kind of pushed to the sidelines.
Interesting.
Jessica Stanley,
Mm-hmm.
Bella Swan's classmate,
Mm,
the one who always seemed to be around.
right. The kind of chatty one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At first glance, she might seem like just your typical high school gossip girl,
Hmm.
all about boys and clothes and who's dating who. But
I see where you're going with this.
there's seriously more to Jessica than meets the eye. We dug up some seriously insightful character analysis,
Oh, wow.
and it really reframes her as a surprisingly complex and relatable figure. Like, you start to see her in a whole new light.
I'm intrigued already.
So buckle up. We're about to go beyond those initial impressions and uncover what her character, what it really reveals about adolescence and social dynamics, and, maybe even a little bit about ourselves along the way.
It's always fascinating how, even in a story that's, full of vampires and werewolves, sometimes it's those human characters that offer the most surprising insights.
Right. Exactly.
And Jessica, despite her kind of superficial first impression, she's no exception.
Totally. So before we get into all the juicy details,
Okay.
let's start with a basic question. Who is Jessica Stanley?
Good place to start.
I mean, when we first meet her, she's presented as Bella's, initial friend at Forks High.
Right.
On the surface, she seems outgoing, she's popular, but even in those early scenes, don't you kind of get the feeling that there's a layer of insecurity underneath?
Oh, absolutely. Like she's trying a little too hard to be the center of attention,
Yeah.
always ready with the latest gossip or a snarky comment.
Exactly. Like, why is she so invested in everyone else's business? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's interesting how her portrayal kind of differs between the books and the movies, don't you think?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. In the books, she definitely comes across as more talkative,
Mhm.
maybe even a bit superficial at times. And there's that whole thread of jealousy, especially when, Edward comes into the picture.
Right. And that jealousy is a big clue to understanding her character. It's not just about Edward, it's about Bella's arrival and how it shakes up the entire social scene at Forks High.
Like, she's disrupting the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. Suddenly, Jessica's not the sun that everyone else revolves around,
Yeah.
She's threatened by Bella's whole vibe.
Like, Bella's just being Bella and is throwing Jessica off.
Right, exactly. It's Bella's quiet confidence, the way she captures everyone's attention without even trying.
And Jessica's picking up on that.
Definitely. It makes her question her own way of doing things, her own way of navigating high school.
But then in the movies, thanks to Anna Kendrick, Jessica gets a little more dimension.
Oh, yeah.
Her comedic side is definitely amped up, which honestly makes those moments of vulnerability even more, poignant.
Absolutely. Like when she gives that graduation speech in Eclipse,
Oh,
remember what she says. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. None of us are.
wow, yeah.
It's like, whoa, where did that come from? That depth.
Right.
Especially coming from someone who, usually seems more concerned with prom dates and gossiping about the Cullens.
It really makes you wonder, is Jessica just putting on an act? Is there more going on beneath the surface?
Exactly. It's like that one line from her speech opens up this whole other side of her character, revealing the uncertainty and anxiety that, let's be honest, we probably all felt in high school.
Totally. It's a great reminder that even in a story about, immortal beings and epic love triangles, the anxieties of adolescence are, universal.
So true. Everyone goes through those moments of self-doubt, of wondering what their place in the world is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to, really get into Jessica's character,
Mhm.
we need to look at some of the key scenes that really showcase her complexity.
Okay. Yeah.
One that always sticks out to me is when Bella first arrives at Forks High. Jessica practically pounces on her. It's like she can't wait to spill all the gossip, especially about the Cullens. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's such a classic high school move, right? It's all about social currency, who knows what, who's connected.
Yeah.
And Jessica wants to be the one in the know, the one everyone turns to for the inside scoop. But don't you think there's also a vulnerability there?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like as Bella gets more settled, her quiet confidence really seems to rattle Jessica.
Totally. It's as if Bella's, lack of interest in the whole social game, it threatens Jessica's whole way of operating.
Like she's not playing by the rules.
Exactly.
You have the prom scene, right?
Yeah.
Jessica is so excited about this, quintessential high school experience.
Of course.
But Bella,
Yeah.
totally detached. Do you think there's, a deeper meaning behind their completely different reactions?
Oh, I think so. It really highlights that recurring theme in Twilight. The choice between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Jessica represents that world of high school dances and, those everyday teenage anxieties.
Right.
A world that Bella is willingly leaving behind. And I think that speaks to a certain tension we all feel, that yearning for something more, even if we're not sure what that more is.
That's a really good point. It's like Jessica represents the familiar, what we know,
Right.
while Bella is drawn to the unknown, the potentially dangerous. But it's at graduation where Jessica throws us a real curveball.
Oh, tell me about it.
I mean, think about that moment when she's giving her speech. She goes from like bubbly and gossipy to unexpectedly insightful and mature.
Totally. It's a total shift. And I think it's crucial. It suggests that beneath that surface, she's actually dealing with some pretty deep stuff, right? Questions about her own identity, her future.
Yeah.
Just like any other graduating senior would be.
Like, is there more to her than we thought?
Right. And that line, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. None of us are. Like, come on. That's a pretty heavy statement coming from Jessica. It makes you realize that beneath that facade, she's going through those same uncertainties and anxieties that, we all face as we transition into adulthood.
So here we have this seemingly superficial character who suddenly reveals this like depth of thought and emotion that we just didn't see coming.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, is she just putting on an act to fit in? Or is there a real evolution happening within her character?
And that question, that tension between who we appear to be and who we really are on the inside, I think that's something that resonates with all of us,
Totally.
It's part of what makes Jessica so relatable, so human.
Yeah, it's like we're peeling back layers of an onion with this character, right?
It really is. It's what makes character analysis so fun,
Totally. You think you have someone figured out,
Yeah.
and then bam,
Yeah.
there's this whole other side to them.
It's all about going beyond those first impressions, digging deeper to understand what makes people tick, the motivations, the insecurities, the hidden desires.
Right. And speaking of motivations, one of the things that makes Jessica so interesting is how much her, like, psychology and her actions kind of reflect those classic adolescent experiences.
Totally. Like, haven't we all felt that need to be liked? That fear of being judged?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in high school.
Exactly. High school is brutal.
Like a social pressure cooker.
It is. And her need to be liked, her tendency to gossip, those moments of cattiness.
Oh, yeah.
It all stems from that very human desire for validation, for belonging. And in high school, that desire is like amplified, right?
100%. It's
Yeah.
like she's overcompensating for those insecurities by trying to be the most informed, the most connected.
Right. The one who knows all the juicy details.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then there's her jealousy towards Bella, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how a newcomer can totally disrupt the social dynamics of a place. Like, Bella just arrives and suddenly everything's off balance.
Poor Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica's not the center of attention anymore. And that's going to be tough for someone who, seems to thrive on that social currency.
It's a tough adjustment for sure. But it's interesting, though, because even with all that jealousy, there are moments when their relationship seems like genuinely friendly.
Oh, for sure.
Like when they go dress shopping for prom, or when Jessica offers Bella advice about boys, What do you make of that? That kind of back and forth between like competition and camaraderie?
Well, it's complicated, right? Like most friendships are, especially in high school. I think there's a mix of genuine friendship and, that underlying competition.
Yeah.
It reminds us that human relationships are messy.
Oh, for sure.
And contradictory,
Yeah.
especially during those teenage years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
Yes.
what makes Jessica like such a compelling character, I think. She's not just a one-dimensional mean girl, right?
Oh, not at all.
She's a multifaceted person who embodies the messy, often contradictory nature of just being a teenager.
Exactly. And let's not forget, in a world populated by vampires and werewolves and all these ancient forces, Jessica represents the every girl.
Oh, totally.
She's the ordinary human caught in the crosshairs of this extraordinary situation.
She's the grounding force, wouldn't you say? Like, she reminds us that even in a world of supernatural drama, the everyday stuff, the human stuff, that still matters.
And that's especially interesting for, those learner types out there in the audience, the one who really want to dig deep.
Right.
Jessica's ordinariness. It allows them to connect with the story on a personal level.
I see that.
Like they see themselves in her struggles, in her triumphs.
Because at the end of the day, we're all human.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even in fantasy, the human element is what resonates most.
So we've talked about Jessica's personality, her insecurities, her role in those key scenes, her relationships. But I think there's another layer to her character that we need to kind of peel back here. The little details, the symbolism that Stephenie Meyer uses to, like, add depth to her portrayal.
I'm listening.
Like, have you noticed how Jessica often acts as a narrative device?
Mm-hmm.
Her observations about the Cullens, especially early on, they're often pretty funny.
Yeah, they are.
And I think they actually serve to, like, voice what a typical person in Forks might think about this strange family.
Oh, totally. Like when she comments on how pale they are
Yes.
or how perfect.
Or how they never seem to eat.
Right. She's basically articulating the audience's unspoken thoughts and suspicions about the Cullens.
Yeah.
Like she's a stand-in for us, the reader or the viewer, pointing to how unusual they are.
Totally. And, maybe even foreshadowing the whole vampire thing.
Exactly. And we can't forget her role as like a foil to Bella.
Yeah.
Her more extroverted personality, her focus on image.
Yeah.
It really highlights Bella's introversion.
And her growing fascination with, with the supernatural.
A classic literary technique.
Oh, for sure.
Using contrasting characters to emphasize certain traits and themes,
Yeah.
Jessica's superficiality accentuates Bella's depth. Her focus on the material world highlights Bella's preoccupation with, well, everything that's not material. It's Meyer's way of subtly guiding how we interpret the story.
It's almost like Jessica represents everything that Bella is leaving behind as she goes deeper into the vampire world.
Right, exactly. She's a reminder of that ordinary life that Bella is choosing to reject.
Do you think there's, like, an element of rebellion in Jessica's choice to stay grounded, even when she's, surrounded by all this supernatural stuff?
That's an interesting thought.
Right.
It's not just that she represents the ordinary, it's that she chooses it.
Yeah.
Even when she has these extraordinary alternatives right in front of her.
Right.
Maybe there's strength in that, a refusal to be swept up in the fantasy, a commitment to her own reality.
And that ties back to her graduation speech, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
It's that moment where she acknowledges how uncertain she is about the future.
Yeah.
But she's still willing to face it, head on. Without the promise of immortality or superpowers.
Exactly. It's like, in a way, Jessica's journey is just as compelling as Bella's.
Wow. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't involve vampires or eternal love.
Right.
It's a reminder that even in the most ordinary of circumstances, you can find extraordinary growth and self-discovery.
For sure.
And, connection.
Yeah. And those things, those are just as valuable, just as transformative as any epic romance or, supernatural adventure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've explored all these nuances of Jessica's character, but we need to address the elephant in the room, right?
Okay.
Some people might just say, well, she's just a flat, stereotypical mean girl.
Right.
How do we reconcile that criticism with all the depth and complexity we've been talking about?
It's a fair point, I think. On the surface, yeah, she does have those traits that we associate with that stereotype.
Yeah.
But if you look closer, I think Stephenie Meyer really intended for her to be more nuanced than that. I mean, stereotypes often have a grain of truth to them, but they never tell the whole story. Rick.
Never. And it's those flaws, those imperfections that make Jessica so relatable.
Oh, totally.
Her insecurities, her jealousies, her desire to fit in. We've all been there.
We've all felt those things or seen them in others.
Yeah.
It's those flaws that connect us to her humanity.
Exactly. And characters, just like real people, they're not static.
Right.
They change, they make mistakes, they learn, they grow.
It's a process.
It is. And Jessica's moments of depth, like that graduation speech,
Powerful stuff.
they challenge the whole mean girl stereotype.
Yeah.
They suggest that there's more to her than meets the eye.
For sure. She's capable of empathy, of self-awareness, of
Totally.
dealing with really complex emotions.
So maybe the question isn't whether or not she perfectly fits that mean girl stereotype.
Right.
But why are we so quick to put people in boxes anyway?
Oh, that's a great point. We love our labels, don't we?
We do.
We rely on stereotypes as a shortcut, a way to make sense of the world.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, it's easier. But we risk missing out on the nuances, the contradictions, the unique things that make each person who they are.
Yeah.
And Jessica, with all her complexities, I think she reminds us that the most interesting people, while they rarely fit neatly into any one category.
Totally. So to really wrap our heads around Jessica Stanley, we need to zoom out a little, look at the bigger picture. What is her story, her struggles, her growth? What does it all tell us about the human experience, even amidst all the vampire drama? you know?
Well, on one hand, Jessica highlights that universal tension between wanting to fit in and wanting to stand out.
Yeah.
Haven't we all felt that, especially during those awkward teenage years?
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to figure out who we are, where we belong.
Trying to figure out how to play the game.
Right, exactly. And how to handle all that social pressure that comes with it.
It's like she's constantly trying on different identities.
Yeah, totally.
Trying to figure out what will make her popular, what will make her worthy of attention.
It's that search for validation.
It is.
Yeah.
But then in those quieter moments, we see glimpses of her real self.
You know.
The person she could be.
Yeah, the person she could be if she weren't so worried about what everyone else thinks.
And honestly, I think we can all relate to that struggle.
Totally.
Even if high school was like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, for sure.
We've all felt that need for acceptance.
Yeah.
That fear of not measuring up.
And don't you think that's what makes her arc so interesting? It's not about becoming a vampire or, like, finding eternal love.
No, it's not.
It's about those small, everyday victories. Learning to speak your truth.
Yes.
Embracing your vulnerabilities.
So important.
Finding the courage to be yourself, even when it feels like the whole world is watching.
Those are the things that matter, you know, those small victories.
They might not seem as dramatic
No, they don't.
as battling vampires or falling in love with a werewolf, but they're just as meaningful.
And just as essential to being human, they're the foundation of self-acceptance.
Yeah. Of resilience, of finding your place in the world. And Jessica, in her own way, shows us that those victories are possible for all of us.
Yeah.
Even if our lives aren't, full of supernatural twists and turns.
Exactly. You know, it's amazing how much we can learn from a character who, at first, you might just kind of brush off, you know?
Totally. Like she's just part of the scenery.
Right. But Jessica Stanley, she's turned out to be like this unexpected source of insight.
It just goes to show you good writing can really surprise you.
Okay.
Even in a story like Twilight, with all the vampires and werewolves.
Right.
It's those human characters, the ones with all the flaws.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that stick with you.
So true. We've talked about Jessica's personality, her relationships, her insecurities, those moments of growth. We've even talked about how she acts as a narrative device, as a foil to Bella.
Right, right.
But before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier. The idea that Jessica represents that ordinary world that Bella's leaving behind.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. She embodies that grounded reality, the human experience with all its limitations and complexities.
And Bella's basically saying, see ya to all that.
Right. She's trading it in for the allure of the supernatural.
But for us, for the readers and the viewers, it makes you think, right?
It really does.
What are we willing to sacrifice for love, for power, for escape? Like, are we all secretly yearning for something more, something beyond the everyday world?
I think it challenges us to examine what we truly value. What are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to walk away from? And that question, it goes way beyond Twilight, right?
Totally. It's like a fundamental human question.
It is.
Yeah.
Whether we're consciously aware of it or not, it's a question we all grapple with.
And Jessica, in a way, she offers a different perspective.
Yeah.
She reminds us that even without vampires and werewolves, human life is full of drama.
Oh, absolutely.
Of heartbreak, of joy, of all those little moments that make up a life.
And those moments, those seemingly insignificant interactions, they often carry more weight than we realize. They shape who we are. They influence the paths we take. They stick with us.
Like, think about Jessica's graduation speech.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a powerful scene because it reveals this depth of thought and emotion that you just wouldn't expect.
Totally.
It makes you realize that under the surface, she's dealing with those same uncertainties.
Those same anxieties.
That we all face as we move into adulthood.
It's a reminder that growth, self-discovery, it can happen anywhere, at any time.
For sure.
For Jessica, it happens at graduation, right?
Yeah.
It's a moment that's both an ending and a beginning.
Yeah.
It shows us that we're always changing, always learning.
I think that's a great way to sum up Jessica's journey. She might not have superpowers or a vampire boyfriend, but her story, it really speaks to the strength of the human spirit, to embracing your vulnerabilities, to finding meaning and connection in the most ordinary of places.
And maybe that's the most extraordinary thing of all, the real magic.
Yeah.
It might not be in escaping the mundane.
Right.
It might be finding the extraordinary within the everyday.
That's deep.
Like learning to appreciate the small moments, the connections we make.
The quiet victories.
Exactly. The things that make a life worth living.
So, The next time you find yourself writing off a character as, just a teenager
Oh, yeah.
or just the gossipy friend,
Yeah.
remember Jessica Stanley. Remember that there's always more than meets the eye.
Always.
And you might just find that those seemingly ordinary characters,
Yeah.
they're the ones who end up teaching you the most.
That's the beauty of really diving into these stories.
For sure.
You come away not just understanding the characters better, but understanding yourself better, too.
Well, that brings our deep dive into Jessica Stanley to a close. We hope you enjoyed this little journey with us.
We sure did.
And we hope you'll join us next time as we unpack another fascinating topic. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those deep dives going.